Amazing. Oh, it's so good to see you all this morning. Welcome to Fabric, as Joe and Shomo said. Particularly if you're visiting, it's really good to have you here this morning. If you do normally come, you'll know, as they said, we're tracking through this series called Don't Stop Believing, where we've been thinking about the things that we get to believe for when we're followers of Jesus. And what we're looking at today is the idea that we can keep on believing that God can use our story, whatever it is. And I know that I haven't met everyone in this room, so I have no idea what people are carrying as they come in. Maybe you're sat here this morning and you're like, you would not be saying that if you knew what was actually going on in my life, whether it's past or present circumstances. I can say with full confidence that God can use your story. So please don't clock out at this point. We are going to read some of the Bible, but just before we do, we're going to be in Joshua 2. So we're in the Old Testament, in the book of Joshua, and the Israelites are on the brink of the promised land. They have been wandering in the wilderness for 40 days, and they're encamped east of the Jordan. They're ready to enter Canaan. And conquering an area called Jericho is key to taking over the land. But it is so protected that it is humanly impossible without God's intervention. And cities like this, often in the kind of city wall surrounding it, there would be houses within the city wall, which is where low-income people, travelers would live. And what we're about to do is explore a story of a lady called Rahab. But just so you can picture it, that's where Rahab lived, right in the city wall. So we're going to read from Joshua 2, the story of Rahab and the spies, starting at verse 1, and we're going to carry on until verse 14, so you can follow along. If you don't have a Bible on you, it will come up on the screens, but we would love everyone to have a paper Bible. So there are some on the little room dividers. Please just help yourself if you want to take one home. This is what it says, Joshua 2, starting at verse 1. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim, a really unfortunate name for a place. Just name it so you're not all distracted for the rest of the time. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab. Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left, and I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly, and you may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, Rahab went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We've heard how the Lord dried up the water in the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. So what does Rahab's story tell us about being able to believe that God can use each of our stories as well? The first thing is her past didn't disqualify her. I don't know if you have ever felt completely inadequate. I recently turned 30, which I made a very big deal about. And a friend gave me a list of things to try and achieve before I turned 30. And one of them, this is particularly niche, but it was to catch a chicken outside of a hutch single-handedly. It's because I'd had a previous experience with chickens where I just find them a bit scary. I don't know what it is. Scary is the wrong word. I was intimidated. When I pick them up, their wings just flap and get in your face. I used to live in Brighton and the seagulls did the same thing. And I hate it. So as we were going to this friend's house where the chickens live, I was with Lucy Roper, who many of you will have met. She's 4. She's an icon, Mark and Joe's daughter. And she's incredibly emotionally intelligent because she looks over at me and says, Keats, don't worry, I'll help you catch a chicken. I'm like, thanks, we've got this. So I kind of thought she was there for moral support. We go out once and we start running after the chickens. But obviously, the minute they clock that you're trying to trap them, they get even faster, even flappier, and then it was completely done. So we go in for dinner, give up for a bit. And then after dinner, I'm like, I need to try again. I need to just go outside and catch a chicken. So I tried to slide my way out without anyone noticing. And Lucy runs after me. It's like, don't worry, Keats, I'm coming to help you. It's like, right. So we go for the same approach, which probably wasn't the wisest thing. I should have thought up some new tricks. But we just start kind of trying to corner them, and then you get close and their wings flap and then I freak out. We just did it again and again and again. And after about 10 minutes of trying, I just lose Lucy. Where has she gone? What is she doing? So I just start shouting. I'm like, Lucy, where have you gone? Lucy, run after her. And as I get around the corner, Lucy has stood there with a chicken in each hand, and she had just grabbed them by the tail. So she stood there, Keats, I did it. I'm like, oh, it doesn't really help me because I have to do it single-handedly. But she looked at me dead in the eyes and said, Keats, don't worry, I was scared when I was 3. It's like, okay. And I got completely shown up by a 4-year-old in terms of bravery. And I know that catching a chicken is not particularly high stakes, but it does tap into the feeling that I'm sure all of us have had at some point of just being totally inadequate, feeling like we don't measure up, like we should have performed better, like we're not enough. That was what happened in that moment. And that is a feeling that Rahab in this story would have known really well. She was a prostitute living in the city of Jericho. So in the eyes of others, her profession would have totally disqualified her from God's love, from respect, from community, from God's plan. There were so many reasons that people could have looked down on her and considered her to be morally unworthy. She is the most surprising and unexpected person for God to choose to use in this moment. But what we see happening in this story is twofold. Firstly, God used her. The timelines in the scripture around this are not crazy clear about if Rahab was still a prostitute when this happened. She is introduced as Rahab the prostitute, but the text doesn't explicitly say whether she was still practicing when God chose to use her. The clue is that geographical thing that I mentioned early on, that she was living in a house in the city wall, that suggests that she may have still been practicing in that area. Many would say that it's quite likely that she was still in the middle of this messy situation when God chose to come in. He wasn't intimidated by her mess, but he chose to meet her where she was at and use her in a really significant way. And it reminds us that God is not put off by the labels that we think we've put on ourselves or that other people have put on us. And we live in a world so obsessed with labels. The culture that we're in at the moment really quickly defines people according to their profession or wealth, their background, ethnicity, gender. And the culture around us quickly cancels people. It can feel like one mistake is all that it takes to just be written off, and that there's no kind of space for comeback or redemption. But what we see here is that God chooses to come into the middle of the mess, despite all of the labels that she put on herself or that people put on her. God comes into it and uses her. And maybe you're here this morning and you're thinking this is all good. You can say that from the front, but you really have no idea. Maybe you've labeled yourself as being morally unworthy. your story, however complicated and messy it is, really matters to God. You're not just a face in a crowd, but you're known and seen and loved. So even the most messy and painful chapters of your life are things that God cares about. They're not irrelevant to him. And if God is love, which is what we believe, then every single part of your existence matters to him. Your struggles, your joys, the decisions you make, the struggles that you face, they all are within his love. You're not an accident. There's nothing that you have to feel guilt or shame about. God can use you. So God chooses to use her, but the most amazing thing, I think, is that Rahab lets him. That she doesn't disqualify herself even when others might have. She says yes to God using her. And I know that there are so many reasons that she could have disqualified herself. She could have compared herself to others and just thought like, oh, there is someone else better for this job. But instead, she responds with faith and she steps up. And I know that I often think of redemption and healing in a really backwards way. I have that comforting picture that we often talk about of like me in the pit, whatever your pit might be. Maybe it's addiction, brokenness, fractured relationships. And I just picture me in my pit, and I have that image of like God with his big, strong arms reaching down, pulling me out. And the next thing that I see is him placing me over here, really, really far away from it. But I don't think that's always how it works. Growing up, I was raised in a really fractured, broken family. Both of my parents were drug addicts. My dad was in prison. Me and my mum were homeless when I was growing up. And for so long, that was kind of the part of my story that I was just desperate for no one to see. I wanted to like squish it down and appear as though I'd like sorted it all out. And I wanted people to be surprised when they heard that story, to be like, no way, you didn't go, that's not your background. And because I was really ashamed of it. And it's only really in the last couple of years that I felt able to hold my past, every single part of it, before God and ask him that question, God, what do you want to do with this? What do you want to do with this really broken, messy part of me? And I wonder what it is this morning that you need to bring before God to ask that same question. The thing that you squish down that you don't want anyone to see. Wonder what it would look like for you this morning to hold it before God and say, God, what do you want me to do with this? So a couple of challenges for us. I wonder in what ways we disqualify ourselves from partnering with God, from being used by him. I wonder which parts of your past you're letting define you. And I wonder how you look at others. I ask this because the call is not just for us individually to let ourselves be used by God, but it is also for us corporately, all together, to be a place where we see the goodness and gold in others and where we draw it out, no matter what people's story or background is. So firstly, Rahab's past didn't disqualify her. Secondly, her faith moved her. I wonder if you've ever had a moment where you felt that you had to act quickly, even though it was risky, uncertain, and could cost you. I had this a couple of years ago. I was very proud of myself because I'd managed to move holiday planning from a group chat into like the booking stage. And I would spend hours scrolling on Airbnb looking for the perfect house, knowing that I actually couldn't really afford any of them. But I would be like, oh, God, surely something will come up. And then one day I landed on this like beautiful chateau that had massive pool, hot tub. It was like too good to be true. But it was cheap. It was like, you know, when you sort from price low to high, which is what I do on most websites, it was like top of the list. I was like, this is amazing. And so I'm like, right, I'm booking it. I'm doing it. And they send me a link to pay rather than paying through the Airbnb app, which should have like raised the alarms in my head. But at this point, I'm like, well, maybe it's just a bit easier for them if I do. I literally get to the page where I'm putting in my card details when it dawns on me I am probably about to fall victim to the least intelligent scam of all time. So I stopped, thankfully. But we all have those moments where we're like, I'm going to miss out if I don't move right now. Like, I need to act quickly because otherwise I'm going to miss out on this thing. And uncertainty and risk are the key things that we find Rahab in this moment in Joshua 2. Rahab was raised in pagan territory, and in a place that was enemy to Israel. So it's likely that she was raised with no knowledge of God personally. But we know from this passage in verse 10, it says that she had heard stories about God. She'd heard of how he delivered the Israelites, how he parted the Red Sea and covered them with this divine protection. Even though she had no personal experience of God for herself, what she had heard about God was enough to stir something up in her and for her to do something so incredibly risky, both personally and politically. When the 2 spies came to her home, she hid them. When the king's officials came to ask her where they were, she lied to them and misled them and sent them in the other direction. It wasn't just a kind gesture that she was doing, which I know is sometimes how I read it. She was essentially committing treason against her people. And at the time, the punishment for committing treason and helping an enemy would have been immediate execution, not just for yourself, but for your whole family. Rahab made a covenant with the spies and asked them to protect her family. So she essentially involves them in this deal that she's making. She risked her life, her family's lives, and everything she had to protect some people that she barely knew just because she believed that God was with them. And in Joshua 2, which we read, verse 11, Rahab declares, "For your God is God in heaven above and on earth below." And when Rahab says this, it's not just a nice acknowledgement of who God is and what he's like. It is a radical shift in loyalty. She's essentially rejecting her people and converting to a new faith and culture. She's completely turning away from her old identity and choosing to fully align herself with God. And I love that Rahab didn't wait for certainty. She had no guarantee whatsoever that everything would work out, no signs. She just had a promise from these 2 strangers that she didn't really know that they would protect her family. And she had faith. And I think so often and probably we, wait for a long time to act on the things that God's asking us to do. We wait until it feels safe or logical or convenient. But what we see in Rahab is this beautiful example of faith that moves forward even when the outcome isn't visible. Rahab's faith challenges us to obey God even when the path isn't clear and the outcome isn't guaranteed. And we're invited to choose to trust God's promises, to move forward, believing that his presence is enough even when nothing else makes sense. So I wonder what it is that you wait for before you obey. Maybe it's certainty or comfort or control. I wonder if there's an area of your life that you feel God asking you to trust him more deeply in. Perhaps with a decision or a conversation or a sacrifice that you feel that he's asking you to make. And I wonder who and what you're ultimately loyal to. Are there loyalties in your life, whether it's to comfort, reputation, culture, that compete with your loyalty to God? So Rahab's past didn't disqualify her. Her faith moved her. And finally, her actions echoed into eternity. What we see in Rahab is how a single, risky, faithful decision made behind the scenes when no one's looking shapes history and echoes into eternity through generations. Rahab's moment wasn't flashy. It wasn't particularly public. It wasn't guaranteed to work, but it was full of faith. And that one simple act of hiding these strangers and protecting them became something that was woven into the greatest story of all time. Rahab's decision ultimately led to her redemption and to the redemption of the whole world. She's listed in Matthew 1, verse 5, as being in the direct genealogy of Jesus. This woman is like fully redeemed from what we learn about her at the start to where she's at the end. Rahab wasn't deeply connected to God's people. She didn't know all of the theology. We know already that she's a prostitute and she was looked down on. But she was available. She said yes to God in a moment that mattered, and God chose to use it. Jesus said in Matthew 13 that a mustard seed, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. It's teeny tiny, but it can become a massive tree when it grows. And the challenge is, do we know that every encounter we have, every decision we make, every moment of courage could open up a much bigger possibility? It could be like a mustard seed that turns into this massive tree. What looks small or unseen to us can become something enormous and eternal when we place it into God's hands. And I would love to read to you a journal entry from Focus 2023 that a friend shared with me the other day. For a bit of context, there'd been a bit of a journey around faith, was just slightly finding his way back to faith, and went along to Focus to just see what would happen with a friend. And this is what was written. The evening before, I had the overwhelming sense of not being able to connect with God. I had a vision of this huge brick wall in front of me, and behind it I could feel the glory and greatness of God. But I couldn't break through this wall. I was punching at it, and my knuckles were broken and bleeding, and as one brick fell, I began to remove another. The place where the first brick had fallen would be filled again. Then during the worship on Saturday evening, the talk was called But Now, about what God was calling us to do now. I saw a vision of this huge bulldozer come in and break the wall down. During the response, I was standing next to Will, friend who took this person to Focus. Standing next to Will, who told me that I should go up for prayer. I said no, but he kept banging on about it, so reluctantly I went. I asked for prayer because I was going back to Manchester into a situation where I was surrounded by things that I didn't want to do anymore and didn't really have a firm foundation. The prayer people, brackets, two really old ladies, said I needed to find a church. And then one of them remembered that she knew someone who was planting a church in Manchester. What's my place? One sec. Planting a church in Manchester. I woke up the following morning to an email inviting me to a barbecue with the team. I went and met some amazing people. God is really doing something here. I can't wait to see what's about to happen in Manchester, and I can't wait to be a part of it. And that was a journal entry from Focus 2023 of Sam Baker, who is just coming to the end of giving up a year to come and serve and join in with what God is doing. And I could not think of a more powerful story to show the idea that one little step of obedience, going forward for prayer, literally changed everything. And the trajectory is like your life. And we've been so blessed by you, Sam. So just so encouraged. And it's a really helpful reminder to me in terms of the role I play with friends, but also in terms of what I say yes to when God asks me. Sometimes we believe that we need a platform, influence, or visibility to do anything beneficial for God, to make a real impact. But this story about Rahab is one that demonstrates that God will take the most unlikely, the least expected kind of what makes sense in the world's eyes person. All he wants is just surrender. Rahab wasn't a leader, a prophet, someone with any public influence. She was a marginalized woman living in a pagan city, but her quiet, courageous act of obedience became part of this big story of redemption. And so often the most eternal things that God does in us happen in the hidden places, when no one is watching, when there's no applause, and when the choice to obey him feels really costly. It's in those moments of simple faith and everyday courage that God uses us most powerfully. Your faithfulness in the unseen may be doing more for the kingdom than you will ever know this side of heaven. So I wonder what a small step of obedience could look like for you right now. Is there something that you sense God asking you to do? Are you willing to be faithful in the quiet places when no one else sees it? And I wonder whose life could be impacted by the decisions that you make. Maybe you're like Will, the friend who dragged their friend along to Focus. What role could you play in someone else's life? Rahab didn't wait until her life was tidy and neatly packed to say yes to God. So I wonder what it would look like for you to say yes to God today, right in the middle of whatever mess you're facing. Will you choose to trust him and let him use you? Amen. We're going to spend a bit of time responding and praying together. So can I invite you to stand if you're able?